Hello, welcome back to Wyvern Minis. I've still got a cold, but that's not going to stop us talking about Heroquest. And the best thing about Heroquest is what we were talking about in the previous video. Looking at the first models I ever bought in Playground, some Orcs and Goblins and Thamir, which I didn't realise were from Heroquest at the time, but turns out they were. And they started my lifelong love of Orcs and Goblins. And then talking about how I'm not really a fan of this old bendy plastic on the Heroquest miniatures. Love the game, not a fan of the plastic. So we played a great game with my daughter and her friend and his kids, and I decided it would be a good opportunity to go through and try and find some alternatives. There's lots of alternative models that you can get in this sort of scale. The key really is trying to get something that fits in the aesthetic of the board, and also fits physically on the board as you're playing the game, because it's not an open war game or anything like that. So I'm just going to go over here some of my thought processes of how I was finding the models that I wanted to use, and maybe it will give you some inspiration if you want to upgrade your Heroquest set. And the best thing about Heroquest is it's your game, play it how you want. Okay, so when I was thinking about updating my Heroquest models, one of the first things that came to mind was, well, what's out there? Games Workshop makes skeletons. Loads of people make skeletons. But the Games Workshop ones are, obviously readily available, plastic, customizable. They're nice models. I like them. They're from the Cursed City box set, and I've got a bunch to paint up. I also have an undead army myself, which I want to update for the old world. But they weren't quite the aesthetic I was after. They're too heavily armoured. It could be confused with the Dread Warrior or something on the tabletop. I want the Heroquest minis to be obvious what they are, not ambiguous at all. Same with the zombies. I mean, the zombies are all right. They're pretty cool. I think somebody went a bit nuts with the tree roots in there. That's not really doing it for me. I get they're trying to suggest that the zombies have come out of the earth, but I mean, a lot of zombies might be raised then and there on the battlefield. Though I do notice that they have armed this lady with something that looks very much like the armament in the original Heroquest. They had these double-handed cleaver things going on. Anyway, I decided I wasn't going to use those zombies for this. I wanted to make sure I had something completely bespoke just for Heroquest. I want the models in the Heroquest box to be just for Heroquest. Any other models that I got for Cursed City or D&D or Warhammer or Frostgrave or any of the other games that I play, they might be used in various miniatures games, but for Heroquest I wanted to just be able to pick up the box, everything's in there, away we go, no fussing. One thing that I might get from Games Workshop is Chaos Warriors, because the Dread Warriors are clearly the replacement for Chaos Warriors because they didn't have the license from Games Workshop to use Chaos Warriors. The only thing is that they might be a little big. These are on 32mm bases rather than 25s, but a few of them have got quite close feet, so they might fit on 25s all right. I only need 4 of them, 4 Dread Warriors, and I really like the aesthetic of these Chaos Warriors. They're just enough interesting details without going overboard, which is the problem with Chaos. Sometimes it goes a bit overboard, for me anyway. So these might work, and I might go for those. Anyway, I was having a look for heroes as well, and there's lots of alternatives. I mean, Hassle-free miniatures. I've got quite a lot of their stuff. It makes some really cool models. This old wizard, Holvin, I've got him. He's my main character in Frostgrave, and I've used him in D&D. Same with this barbarian, great barbarian model. This is my wife's main character in D&D, sorceress. So really cool stuff. Same heresy miniatures as well. Love heresy miniatures. This sorceress could be a good alternative for a female wizard. This barbarian, I've got him for Frostgrave, and yeah, he's great. And that was my first D&D character. Actually, I turned him into a half orc. Anyway, really cool stuff, but I wasn't 100% sold on buying the same models that I've already got. I thought maybe I need to do something different, and so I kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit, or the gaming board, perhaps would be a more appropriate thing to say, and had to think about, well, how does the game work in terms of the miniatures? So looking at when you place your furniture down, it takes up space on the board. That table actually takes up all 6 of those spaces, which it doesn't fill up very well. I think having some sort of base on that table might be a good idea to make it very clear that you can't move there, because at a glance it's very easy to accidentally try and move into one of the spaces that the table is occupying. These bases are cobblestone bases that I printed out, 25mm bases, and they fit within the squares perfectly. The squares are 25mm on the new board, a little bit smaller on the old one, as I showed in the previous video. So in this particular example, if you've got the furniture set out like this, you can only fit models on the other spaces, as I've shown with the bases. Things can get crowded depending on how big the models are, especially if you add a door in there as well, because the doors sort of, they've got their extra bit of base and that squishes things along, which is sometimes a little bit difficult if you do have a lot of enemies ganging up on you in one room. But I thought, get those out of the way, and how does it work with the actual models you get in the box, the ones that they're intending you to use? So I put a few of them down, and you see there the axe on the dwarf sticks out a bit. The barbarian is actually very self-contained on his base, as is the elf and the wizard really. It's only the dwarf that kind of has his axe overhanging significantly. But when it comes to the enemies, you know, the undead ones tend to be a bit smaller. They're quite easy to tessellate because they're quite self-contained. But these abominations, the Sahuagin and the gargoyle, I mean, you know, they all fit on the same 25mm footprint, but their wings and arms and weapons and whatever poke out quite a lot, and it can make it a little bit challenging when you're trying to play the game. So that was what I was thinking about, was if I'm going to get some models to replace these, can I also make it a little bit more user-friendly during the game? Perhaps make them so they don't overhang so much. And that drew me towards the 3D printing direction, because I could rescale things and make sure that I had exactly the right size models that I wanted. Okay, so it was these orcs that I found at first, which really gave me the inspiration to start 3D printing models for Heroquest. I absolutely love these orcs. The sort of combination of the old style aesthetic with a new kind of brutality to them is just fantastic. I just had to get them as soon as I saw them. They are provided with some alternative poses and also alternative kind of clothing and armour. Just brilliant models. Pretty big. I think that's standing on a 32mm base there. So they are quite big, but the beauty of 3D printing is that you've got the opportunity to rescale them and make them a little bit smaller. So I did do a bit of experimenting with seeing how they'd fit. I had to do the same thing with these skeletons. And these skeletons from Avatars of War, just brilliant multi-part skeletons. Much more what I was after. They're not as armoured as the GW ones. Very clear what they are, and I think they look great. I've got quite a few Avatars of War things that I bought in the past, various characters and things like that. Very high quality, and they've got the scythes, which means that they match up nicely with what you get in the Heroquest box. Sticking with the Avatars of War, they've got these goblins, and I did buy these goblins because I like them for Warhammer. I think they're perfect. For Heroquest, a bit too spiky, a bit too scary. Goblins are just there as chaff, really, you know. And so these guys are absolutely perfect. These have a real old school look to them. Again, you've got some different poses, some different kind of armours and armaments. I just love these. They really hark back to those monopose goblin spearmen, the ones that were really deadly if you put your hand down on the table too quickly back in the day. Yeah, moving on to the heroes. This is a proper Conan the Barbarian from Avatars of War again. Now, he has the problem with the dwarf in that his sword is poking out a long way. So I've printed him off, and I think he looks great. But will he work very well in the game? I'm not sure. So I need to really have a proper test of that. But they've got this alternative, which looks a bit more like Conan from the books to me. A little bit more contemplative, maybe a bit more loquacious than his movie counterpart. I mean, it's a very strong pose, and that would work really well. He doesn't overhang the base at all, so he's going to fit in game-wise perfectly. My only question is how well he'll work alongside the dwarf that I've got. Starting off with the female dwarf that I found, because I decided I wanted to make sure I had female versions of all the characters so that my daughter could pick female versions of any character. This is the male dwarf, and you can see here where the pose is quite similar to the pose of this guy. So will they look good next to each other? I don't know. I figured this would be a good female sorceress or wizard, even though she's an elf. You know, we won't hold that against her. I think it's alright. Looks pretty cool. Oh, and this female barbarian, great model. Makes me think of Helga from the Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out recently, and she's really good. Michelle Rodriguez as a female barbarian is great in that movie. Very strong, not overhanging the base too much. Yeah, wonderful model. This wizard, very much like the old school Heroquest wizard. So yeah, I went for him. I also did another alternative, or a couple of alternatives, which are a bit more sort of Gandalf-like, bearded and robed. Elf ranger. It seemed to me like the elf is more of a ranger. He's proficient with swords and spells. Bows seem to fit, so I thought this is a good alternative. It took me ages looking for an elf actually, because trying to get one that fitted all the various aspects of that character. And this is the female version I found, which is really good. Yeah, the Baelor. So I decided that, to me, the gargoyle seems like the statue of a demon like this. It's a statue of a kind of ancient demon, very similar to the Balrog. Clearly, Games Workshop used the gargoyle as some kind of inspiration for the Bloodthirster, I would say. You can see that inherited there. And the Baelor from D&D is very similar. And again, this model, although it could be quite big and imposing, because you can rescale it in 3D printing, it will fit really well. And the same with these Sahuagin. I think these are really cool. I've ummed and erred about going back and making Fimir, but I couldn't find any Fimir models that I particularly liked that weren't just remakes of the original old school Heroquest ones. I think the Abominations, Sahuagin, is they look pretty cool. I'm not quite sure how they fit in the setting, but they do look pretty cool. And these versions are really nice. Not too big and bulky. You've got some options in what you arm with. You've got different arms. One of them's got a fish that you can attack him with, which is very Monty Python. But yeah, I think those will really do the job. So I'm happy with that. And there's a few other bits and pieces I've got to sort out. I'm not quite there on all of it, but pretty much all there. Yeah, that's a go with the fish. There it is. And the final thing was, I thought having some new furniture would be quite good. Not necessarily replacing all the tables and all that kind of stuff, but the walls, when you can't go down a corridor, if a corridor is blocked, you just use a cardboard tile, which I find really difficult to see. So something 3D would be a good idea. And also the stairs here, I just think it's a nice idea. You've got stairs where you can place your characters on each stair going down, just to have that 3D effect. I think it looks pretty cool. And there's a really nice secret door as well, so you don't have to use a normal door. You can have one that looks like it's the wall opening up. Little things like that I think are nice touches to add into the game, just to make it a little bit more cinematic. Okay, so with the STL files chosen, most of them anyway, I got onto the Tissue slicing software, which is what I use. And here I've got the skeletons, multi-part skeletons. I've tried to squeeze as much onto the build plate as possible. I've got an Elegoo Mars 3 Pro, which is a fantastic resin printer. Not the biggest build plate in the world, so I'm just trying to make sure that I maximise the space on it, print off as much as I can in one go, to sort of reduce the number of print runs, because it takes a few hours for each print. And this is how they come out, still on the sort of scaffolding supports. Really nice, very happy with them, just maybe a touch too big. I don't think they'll quite look right. They're more heroic scale, which the Avatars of War stuff tends to be more heroic scale rather than pure 28mm, so they're a little bit big compared to the other things. I had the same issue with the Orcs. I printed them out, fantastic, but with their quite wide stances and the fact they're very big and bulky, they really need to stand on 32mm bases. So here I actually reduced them down a little bit so that they would fit on 25mm bases. Each time I did a print, I tried to make sure I printed out some of these cool cobblestone bases that I got, because I thought they'll look really nice on the Heroquest board. They fit in perfectly. And just to try and be economical with what I was doing, making sure I printed out a few bases each time I was printing out some models. 3D printing has become a lot more accessible recently, cheaper and fairly easy to do. There's just a few little idiosyncrasies you've got to be aware of, making sure the build plates are level, setting the 0 points and that kind of thing. But really a lot of it is trial and error, I would say. There's very little in the way of hard and fast rules of how things should work. Different STLs work in slightly different ways sometimes, but mostly I found that you don't need to do too much mucking around with the settings, and things seem to work pretty well. There was a couple of issues that I had. Maybe I overfilled a couple of build plates, so a couple of feet didn't print off properly on a couple of Orcs and Goblins. But then I tried printing them out again and the feet still didn't go out properly, so maybe it's just the case that needed to be rotated a bit or something, I don't know. So these are the Orcs at the slightly reduced scale to fit on 25mm bases, straight, fresh out of the printer, still wet with resin, so that obscures the detail very slightly. They need to be fully cleaned and cured. At this stage they're quite flexible, so you can't quite see the detail so well, but they do come out nicely once the excess resin is cleaned off, and you do that in the cleaning station. So my daughter helped me out here. She kept the camera nice and steady. Isopropyl alcohol in the cleaning station, prise them off the build plate, put them in the basket, chuck it in and whack it on. It spins up and cleans it all off. Then it just needs to sit on the side to dry, and then can be put onto the curing station, which is the same thing with a different attachment on top, shines UV and cures it. These are the Orcs and Goblins that didn't work quite so well, cut off at the knees. Used to be adventurers like you, and then I got cut off at the knees, whatever they say in Skyrim. Yeah, not sure what happened there, but it happened a couple of times with those Goblins. They're quite small, I don't know. It doesn't matter too much, I'll just print out some more. So the whole thing I was trying to do with these models is to try and get an internal consistency within the Heroquest game. Make sure that they look good next to each other and that they fit nicely on the board to play the game with. That's my prime concern. So when I was comparing the Orcs and Goblins, these little Goblins, they look about right. Even though this Orc has been reduced in size a little bit, I didn't reduce the Goblins, I kept them as they were. But they look good. Goblins are smaller, Orcs are bigger. Looks fine to me. They're going to work really nicely. I might increase the Orc just a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I liked having a look at comparing them to the original figures, because the original figures fit on the board pretty well, apart from a few of the monsters are a little bit big with their weapons, but the heroes fit very nicely. And the elves that I printed out, very similar size to the original elf, and I think an improvement as well, which is the main thing. I've got my barbarians. I love both of these sculpts, so it's going to be hard to pick which one to use. The only thing, the stoic one standing up with his sword underneath him will fit on the board better. But yeah, we'll see. Get them both painted up. Lovely models. And that female barbarian, I could have maybe increased her a little bit in size, but she does look really nice like that. Fits on the base nicely. I think it's okay. She's just a little bit of a shorter woman, and that's not a problem, is it? She's still pretty hard with that huge axe. That's a great model. I really like her. And well, you can see that bendy sword is really highlighting why I've done what I've done in terms of making new models for it. I mean, that close-up look at that barbarian model, it is a nice sculpt. It's just a shame about the material, really. But there you go. The dwarf, I mean, I liked the previous dwarf. I like my new dwarf. I think I prefer my new dwarf. It's just whether he looks too similar to the pose of the barbarian with the sword underneath his hands. So get him painted up and see what we think. And finally, the gargoyle. So my Baylor that I printed out at a fairly modest scale. He will sit nice on a 32mm base, but you can see he's not quite as wide. His wings aren't sticking out as much. I think he's still very imposing. He's going to look scary for the adventurers. But yeah, his feet won't quite fit on the 25mm base there. We'll have to go on the 32. And I think that's all right. It will work game-wise. The other one pokes out quite a lot, so yeah, I think that'll be all right. So I've got a few more things to print out, a couple more things to find, and then I'll be on to painting. So the next video will hopefully be a bit of a painting video, and then hopefully it won't be too long till I can get it back on the tabletop and play another game with a whole new set of awesome looking minis. As I say, there's lots of good ideas in the minis that they did. I just don't like the bendy plastic. That's the main thing. So there you go. The best thing about Heroquest is making it your own. Enjoy. Goodbye.